Good morning, my friends. If you're watching this, it is indeed Tuesday, and so this is our Tuesday tune-up conversation. This morning's topic is knowledge. Now, knowledge is kind of a funny thing. We spend a great deal of our time trying to acquire it so that we can cope with the world and make a life for ourselves. Knowledge, we're told, is the key to life in some ways. Knowledge is power. It's a gateway. It's something to which we all aspire. Now, this is true, and knowledge is a good thing. Knowledge is one of those things that we sort of tend to put up on a pedestal. Every one of us has some level of knowledge and some level of formal schooling, from tiny children in preschool all the way up to high school and beyond. Our society indeed places such a value on knowledge that we use public funds to offer every child the opportunity to attend school. Indeed, we go even further and create institutions of higher learning, which are in some ways modern temples of knowledge. And yet, for all of this, there are times when knowledge fails us. There are times when knowledge can actually get in the way of real learning. Paul talks about this to the church in Corinth when he speaks of the God of this world. Now, he's talking specifically about Satan, but if you think about it, there are many gods of this world that we create. Money, power, status. But knowledge can also be one of the gods of this world if we let it. For knowledge can create certainty. And certainty often leaves little to no room for other things. Differing thoughts, opinions, new ways of looking at the world, these can all be crowded out by the certainty that knowledge can bring us. We know that the world is a certain way, so it can be hard for us to imagine any other way that the world might be. But for all of our pursuit of knowledge, there are other ways that the world may be. Jesus teaches the disciples this time and time again. We know that you cannot restore a blind man's sight or a deaf man's hearing simply by touching him. We know that. We know that you cannot feed 5,000 people from 5 loaves and 2 fish. We know that the dead cannot be brought back to life, yet Jesus did every one of these things and a lot more. And in each case, he challenged the disciples to see the world in a new way, to rely less on the certainty of their knowledge. Jesus was constantly challenging the disciples to look at the world differently, to rely less on what their knowledge told them and more on what God was providing for them. Now, sometimes Jesus, in his more human moments, would even get a bit impatient with the disciples. Mark's gospel actually tells 2 stories of Jesus feeding a large number of people. Now, the second time around, when the disciples rely upon their knowledge and tell Jesus, it's impossible to feed this crowd, he gets tired of it and he rebukes them. Do you still not perceive or understand, he says? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes and fail to see, ears and fail to hear? And do you not remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets did you collect of the pieces? And they kind of sheepishly say, 7. And he says, do you not yet understand? Whew. Well, I have to tell you, there are times when I really envy the disciples the experience of walking and talking and sharing meals with Jesus when he was among them here on earth. And there are other times when I am very grateful that we have the perspective of history and retrospection by knowing the rest of the story. This is one of those times. I don't think I'd want to be one of the disciples on the receiving end of a Jesus rebuke. It's easy for us to judge the disciples harshly, though, isn't it? To wonder how on earth they could be so dim. I mean, they were right there. They were standing next to him when he worked all of the miracles. How could they not see that Jesus was really different? And he wasn't bounded by the limitations that in our knowledge we just take for granted. But if you think about it, perhaps that's the very point. They were so grounded in their knowledge, so certain that they knew how the world worked. And here comes Jesus, and he's like no one they have ever met. Rather than accept the world as it was, Jesus challenged the paradigm and had the power and ability to change it. Not only that, but he challenged the disciples to not accept the world as their knowledge told them it was, and to be a force for change, for he taught them that they too could indeed change the world. That's some powerful stuff, isn't it? Continuing in the gospel, right after this, Jesus asked them, "Who do people say that I am?" And Peter responds, "Lord, you are the Messiah." And Jesus confirmed this. Yes, I am indeed the Messiah. But he told them not to tell anybody about it. And then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must be arrested and humiliated, that he must be rejected by the leaders and be killed, and on the third day he would rise again. Well, to the disciples, this must have been crazy talk. For it was common knowledge that the Messiah would come to fix everything that was wrong with the world. In their knowledge, they knew the Messiah would be a warrior king who would overthrow the Romans, drive them out of Israel, and return the land to its former glory. Everybody knew this, and it was the fondest hope of all the Jews that the Messiah would come and do exactly that. And now Jesus is confirming that he is indeed the Messiah, but that he wasn't going to do any of those things. Rather than lead the rebellion, he was to be hated and beaten. He would accept the shame of the cross and be killed by the very people he was supposed to overthrow. Judged by the lens of their knowledge, this would mean that Jesus was not the Messiah, yet they had seen the miracles, they had listened to his teaching, and he had just confirmed to them that he very much was the Messiah, and so they found themselves with quite a conundrum. Either Jesus was the Messiah, or he was just a powerful man who was kind of a kook. And then Peter and John and James go with him to the mountaintop and witness the transfiguration. You know that story. Jesus is surrounded by a gleaming white light, and out of nowhere appear Moses and Elijah to confirm with Jesus, and a voice from heaven tells them, "This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him." Wow. Now, on their way up the mountain, the disciples must have been puzzled as they were trying to reconcile their image of what the Messiah should be with the reality of what Jesus taught them. And now they are witnesses to another miracle. This time, not one that Jesus is performing, but one that is performed on Jesus himself. They see the Holy Spirit illuminating Jesus and transfiguring him in front of their very eyes. And they hear God himself speaking directly to them. Well, this is more than enough to convince them that Jesus is truly the Son of God, and he is in fact the long-awaited Messiah. They are now ready to admit that their knowledge has failed them, and that they must rely less on what they know and more on what they hear and see and learn from Jesus. Okay, so what does that tell us today? Well, sisters and brothers, we too are Jesus' disciples. Yes, we have the perspective of history to inform and to shape our understanding, but is that enough? Jesus challenged the disciples to change the world, and that's exactly what they did. After the resurrection, they went to the four corners of the earth and spread Christianity throughout the world in an unprecedented fashion. They had learned to rely less upon the knowledge of the world and more upon the knowledge of the risen Christ. Do we do the same? Do we rely more upon the things that we know about the world, or do we allow ourselves to trust that God is at work in the world and will enable us to do his will. Now, coming out of COVID, the world is in the midst of transition, a time that can be unsettling and confusing. We haven't been in a place like this before, and we don't know what we should do next. Well, we start with self-examination. Now, that's never an easy process, and change is not something that we address easily. In a time like the one we're living, it is oh so tempting to fall back on our knowledge of the world, to embrace the familiar and the comfortable, and to not even open ourselves to the possibilities that change might bring. But Jesus teaches us that while this may seem the safest and easiest way, it is not his way. Jesus challenges us to look at the world with a fresh set of eyes and embrace other ways of living, other paradigms that are out there. Now, the way may be difficult and unfamiliar, but remember this: Jesus told us that he would be with us unto the end of the age. He's going to be by our side the whole time. And so, putting our faith in Jesus rather than in the certainty of our knowledge may just find us changing the world in ways that we never could have imagined. Like the disciples did 2,000 years ago, may we go out and do the same. God bless you.